3 spine-chilling true terrors revealed, haunted stories of the sinister and unexplained. Sarah's heart raced as she stepped onto her front porch, the evening air thick with a sense of foreboding. 2 small children were finally tucked into bed, leaving her to face the darkening world alone. She worked the late shift at the diner, a refuge where locals melted away their daily weariness. But now, the familiar creaking of her porch felt like an eerie farewell to safety. The fading light revealed strange, intricate symbols crudely etched into the wooden panels, shadows twisting around them, waiting. Graffiti? Perhaps. Or a warning? As she peered closer, a chill crept down her spine. Ominous shadows slipped between the trees lining her cul-de-sac, cloaked figures watching with unseen eyes. A gnawing unease clenched her gut. Crestwood Heights, her quiet neighborhood, suddenly seemed hostile, an alien landscape disguised in the dark. Everything she thought she knew turned sinister, desperate. Sarah slipped over to Mr. Thompson's. The retired cop lived just 2 houses down, his gentle ways shielding decades of history. He greeted her with a warmth that made her feel safe, until she mentioned the symbols. His face grew serious, transforming the cozy living room into a rec room tinged with dread. "You've heard the stories, haven't you?" he started, voice low. "These symbols? They're tied to the past. Dark legends shadow our town, whispers of souls who seek retribution." Every word hung in the air like a smoke-filled warning. "Unsolved disappearances," he explained, tragedy wrapped around them like fog. Each tale, older than time, stirred the air with fear. The spirits were restless, demanding sacrifices, never forgotten. Panic coursed through Sarah as the grip of fear clawed at her sanity. Each neighbor she had trusted, now looked like a face in a crowd of the unknown, and every shadow lurking was another question, another threat. "Mr. Thompson," she managed, throat tight with anxiety. "What can I do to keep my kids safe?" But even as she pressed for answers, dread twisted in her heart. The truth lurked closer than she thought. The community she loved was becoming a labyrinth of distrust. Questions thrummed in her mind. How many neighbors wore the mask of safety while hiding a secret? Every light flickering on around her felt like a taunt, daring her to unearth the darkness beneath. "Before we continue, I need to tell you something important that's happening. YouTube has been making changes to their system and many people are missing notifications from channels they follow. If you're enjoying the content, click the bell and select all notifications so you don't miss future videos. And if you can leave a like, it really helps me with reach. Seriously, it makes a difference. Oh, tell me in the comments where you're watching from. I'm always curious to know who's on the other side of the screen. Now let's continue. Returning to the porch, the silence was suffocating. A warm breeze swept over her, but all she felt was sweat trickling down her spine. The shadows thickened, their whispers now a cacophony that echoed through the trees, a nightmarish symphony. Her children's soft breaths molded into the darkness, seeming so innocent yet painfully vulnerable. But protection from spirits? How do you shield them from the unseen? And when the phone vibrated in her pocket, she nearly jumped. An unknown number lit up the screen, pulse racing. Should she answer? What horrors awaited her on the other end? Each second felt like eternity as she stared into the abyss, shadows swirling around her, ready to summon forth whatever nightmare was held at bay. The truth lingered in the phone's ring, a siren call drawing her deeper into the heart of Crestwood Heights where danger lurked, and safety seemed a distant memory. Without thinking, Sarah swiped to answer. "Hello?" she breathed, her voice barely above a whisper. A moment of silence stretched on the other end, heavy and suffocating. Then, a voice, low and gravelly, dripped with malice. "Do you want to know what happens to the ones who don't listen?" Panic surged. "Who is this?" she demanded, heart pounding in her chest. "But you already know, don't you?" The voice chuckled darkly, sending shivers racing down her spine. "You can feel them, can't you? They're close. Close." The word hung there, an accusing finger pointing straight at the shadows looming behind her. the children sleeping just a few feet away. An urge to flee washed over her, but her feet felt glued to the porch floor. "What do you want?" She choked out, but the line went dead. A dizzying mixture of fear and adrenaline punched her gut. She snapped her head back towards the house, and the darkened windows loomed like vacant eyes, watching her, waiting for something. Diverting her frantic energy, she ran inside. A quick glance at the kids assured her they were fine, peacefully nestled under layers of blankets with their stuffed animals. She shut the door firmly behind her and locked it, breathing heavily as if the act alone would wall off whatever macabre force now threatened them. That night, Sarah couldn't shake the feeling of being watched. Each creak of the house played like a drum in her ears, so loud she could hardly think. Every shadow stretched, danced across walls that seemed to close in on her. In a desperate attempt to find her center, she turned on every light, her home blaring like a beacon against the night. With trembling hands, she grabbed her phone again and started scrolling through the history of the area's legends, hoping to find an answer. The screen was filled with stories of disappearances, unsettling truths about the homes she thought were hers. Each article flickered like the lights around her, casting ominous doubts inside her heart. She landed on a thread about the symbols. They weren't just graffiti after all. People claimed they were marks drawn by those who had made dark pact sacrifices to keep the spirits at bay. Abruptly, she stood frozen as the words leaped from the screen. "Each child offered brings peace to the restless." "No. No." She gasped, shaking her head violently, her breath coming in short gasps. But as the reality washed over her, the instinct to protect her children kicked in with unrelenting ferocity. She had to act, or rather, she had to hide. Rushing to the hall closet, Sarah gathered supplies, blankets, flashlights, anything she could use to create a sanctuary. She didn't want to think about whatever force was at play. She needed to protect her children from the shadows creeping ever closer, an intimate knowledge of unspeakable horrors flickering just beyond the veil of safety. The clock ticked loudly. Time slipped away as dread enveloped her. Suddenly, there was a knock, soft, yet echoing with deliberate slowness at the door. "Mommy?" came a soft whisper from the hallway. Both children appeared, sleepy-eyed, battling against a darkness they didn't fully comprehend. The light around them flickered momentarily. "Stay here," she mouthed, her body tensing. Should she open that door? What awaited her outside was cloaked in more than just shadow. It was the culmination of secrets and dark histories that lingered just outside her threshold. Sarah's heart thudded louder and louder, the kind of sound that turns the very blood in your veins to ice. Gathering her courage, she whispered prayers to what may or may not be listening. Whatever lurked beyond that door had to know. She would do anything to keep her children safe. Just as she resolved to steady an outburst against the unknown, the knock came again. Only this time, it felt heavy, more insistent. The voice was back, twisted and mocking. "Sarah, let me in. They missed you." The next moment could decide everything. The silence that followed the mocking voice felt suffocating. Sarah's breath came quick and shallow, her mind racing as she weighed the impossible choice: confront the darkness, or cower in safety with her children. "Mommy." The voice from the hallway broke through her chaos, a fragile plea wrapped in innocence. She spun around to see them, Zoe and Liam, wide-eyed and trembling, with shadows clinging to their small forms like cobwebs. The flickering lights cast distorted shapes on their faces, making them look like fragile ghosts in the heavy stillness. "Get back, please," she urged in a tight whisper, panic sending her heart into a frenzied rhythm. Whatever lurked outside could feel her fear. She could sense it clawing at the edges of her sanity, trying to worm its way in, whispering secrets meant only for her ears. With each knock against the door, a thrill of dread lanced through her. "I can't let it in," she thought, though deep down, an unlikely thought stirred. What if opening the door meant saving her children from what waited beyond? But there was no time for speculation. Another knock shattered her hesitation, this time accompanied by a scrape, as if something was testing the very hinges of her sanity. The voice grew impatient. You know what I want, Sarah. They play in the dark, but you never let them. Not yet. Sweat pooled at her temples, slipping down her neck like icy fingers clutching at her sanity. The fear was visceral. She clutched her phone tightly, her last lifeline in the chaos. She thought about calling for help, but the words caught in her throat. Would help even come? Wouldn't it just turn into a futile attempt, another distraction, while whatever waited outside settled in, lured by her distraction? Stay in the closet. She hissed to her children, pointing a trembling finger. The kids hesitated, their little faces reflecting the terror shared between them. She ushered them into the hall closet, her heart splitting at the thought of shutting them away like treasures in a vault, yet there was no other choice. She had to protect them, even from the truth. Just as she shut the closet door, another insistent knock made the walls shudder. Let me in or you will lose them. The voice was no longer just mocking, it was threatening, drenched in crude inevitability. She backed away from the door, her heart thumping wildly, eyes darting to the windows. Outside, the night pressed against the glass, thick and oppressive. A fleeting thought dashed through her mind. What if everything was connected? The dark symbols, the phone call, the suspicious neighbors she had brushed off. What if they all pointed to one horrifying truth? With trembling hands, she fumbled for the kitchen knife, gripping the cold handle as sweat slipped down her palm. This wasn't how she expected her night to unfold, and yet, here she was. Waiting. Listening. The knocking morphed almost into a pounding. Sarah. The voice echoed, insistently. You think you're safe inside? I'm everywhere and I'm coming for what belongs to me. Her heart dropped. Compulsion clawed at her chest, a horrid mix of dread and despair. It knew her name. It knew her. Would she face whatever was out there, or risk losing everything? Just then, the lights flickered once more, the house dimming into unsettling shadows, swallowing her breath as moments stretched into eternity. And then, through the thick darkness, a sudden cold draft swept through the room, a sickening premonition that made her skin crawl. It whispered, "You can't keep hiding, your time is almost up." The door shook with force, rattling upon its frame. Was it too late to turn back? With each heartbeat, Sarah realized she was on the precipice of a choice that could shatter everything she held dear. In that moment, the whispers grew louder, more distinct, calling her name again. Sarah, let me in. What would she do next? The door quaked again, a violent shudder that tore at the air, echoing the desperation in Sarah's heart. You can't hide forever. It taunted, a sickening melody just out of reach. The children in the closet stared wide-eyed, their whispering breaths barely a sound beneath the mounting chaos. Please don't be afraid, Sarah murmured, though the words felt empty even to her. Clutching the knife tighter, she ventured toward the sound, the blade trembling in her palm. Every step was heavy with dread, her commitment to protect them rising in the face of paralyzing fear. She pressed herself against the cool wall, listening to the pulse of the night around her. Outside, the wind howled like a feral animal, sending waves of dread rippling through her. The walls felt like they might cave in, the very house conspiring against her. Shadows danced manically with the flickering lights, their forms grotesque and menacing. Mommy, I'm scared, Zoe's small voice seeped through the closet door. Just stay quiet and safe, I promise I'll come back, she called, forcing strength into her voice. But her mind teetered on the brink, drowning in anxiety and the oppressive presence looming outside. Suddenly, a crash resounded from the other side of the house, a sound that rattled her bones. The lights flickered again, plunging the room into darkness more profound than before. A terrible chill swept over her, filling her lungs with the taste of panic. Was it in the house? Had her urgency to check on her children cost her the moment needed to shield them from its malevolence? Breath quickening, she pivoted, every muscle taut as the door quaked once more, the voice now a visceral growl. Open up, Sarah. I know you're in there. It was a sinister parody of a friend, something entirely wrong. The mocking tone sent shards of ice radiating through her veins. You can't protect them forever, the darkness will find its way. In a fit of terror, she lunged back to the closet, crouching low to where her children were hidden. Stay inside. Don't come out. She hissed, biting back her own scream. The knife felt foreign in her grip. Was it her weapon or a desperate reminder of her loss of control? The walls groaned, and she could almost hear the being outside slithering against them, hungry, knowing. Mortified, she glanced at the window to find the dark figure moving just beyond the glass, and for a gut-wrenching moment, they locked eyes. Its face was a swirling void, an uncanny echo of malicious intent reflecting her deepest fears. Mommy, Liam whimpered from within the closet, then something changed. She felt a jarring impact followed by a sudden silence, like the calm before the storm. The door was still shaking, but the voice it had stopped. Every instinct told her to flee, to grab her children and run into the night. But retreating now felt as inevitable as standing still. She knelt beside the closet, desperately wishing to shield Zoe and Liam from the malignant force pressing upon them. Then came a low whisper, weaving itself into her anxious thoughts, smoother than silk and laced with malevolence. If you really want to save them, simply let me in. The ultimate choice throbbed in her mind. What if the price of their safety was her own? A deep breath filled her lungs, but all she could do was gaze into the void where it lingered, an endless source of darkness demanding to be let in. Heartbeat racing, she wanted more than anything to rush forward and barricade herself against its overpowering pull, yet something in the depths of her fear urged her to listen. What if? The whispers wrapped around her as she stood, faced with the maddening uncertainty of trust. Would the truth bring deliverance or destruction? Would this shadow consume them all? The question lingered in the air, heavy with despair. Which side are you on, Sarah? The very walls reverberated with its taunting echo. Could she resist for much longer? What would she choose to save her children? The shadows thickened, wrapping around Sarah like a suffocating shroud. She could still feel the weight of that grip on her mind, an insistent voice prodding at her sanity. Let me in, it cooed, softer now, almost tender. Like a mother cradling a child. It twisted her gut, excitement mingling with dread. Please, no, she gasped, shaking her head as if to physically reject the very thought. It knew her. Knew her vulnerabilities, and echoed them back to her, twisting them into grotesque promises. The children needed her. Sarah's resolve tightened like a vice around her heart. She had to find a way to protect them from this nightmare, this insatiable darkness clawing at the edges of their lives. Suddenly, a harsh crash reverberated through the house, instantly shattering the thick silence. The door wasn't just rattling anymore, it was giving way. Sarah turned to the closet, her voice urgent and raw. Stay down. Don't move. The children stifled their breaths, quiet sobs echoing back, and the moment felt suspended. Panic igniting within her chest, she darted across the room, heart thundering against her ribs. She could see the outline of the door splintering, the warped wood bending under relentless pressure. I'll protect you, she whispered, though her words now sounded like a mantra she clung to in desperation. Just then, the light flickered back to life. A weak, flickering bulb hung above, illuminating the face of the door, grotesquely contorting as the force outside lunged again. It felt like an age had passed since she first heard that voice. Each second pulled her further into a pit of dread. Sarah's grip on the knife tightened painfully, her knuckles white in the pale light. She took a deep breath and steadied herself, deciding to confront the horror pressing so desperately against their home. The time for hiding slipped away like sand through her fingers. With another crash, the door yielded a crack, and Sarah screamed a warning, bolting toward the breach just as a chilling gust of wind howled through the opening. The air turned frigid, stinging her skin, an uninvited chill hugging her closer to its impending doom. Let me in, Sarah. Just a little more, the voice sneered, reeking of malice and enticing promises. It slithered around her like a serpent, teasing at her thoughts. Part of her wanted to scream back that she would never let it in, yet an equally powerful part whispered of the salvation it could offer. Liam's terrified whimper cut through her thoughts. Mommy. Each pang of his voice echoed in the recesses of her heart, pushing her toward the edge. She couldn't let this creature take them, she wouldn't. As if sensing her renewed determination, the force outside intensified, claws now scraping against the edges of the door, splintering wood and sending shards flying. It was as if her refusal fueled its rage. Stop. Stay back. She shouted, feeling the primal fear course through her veins. Did it hear her? Did it care? Then, in a sudden burst of momentum, the door burst open, slamming violently against the wall, revealing nothing but darkness beyond. An absence rather than a presence, though dread seeped from it, coiling around her throat like a noose. Instinctively, she raised the knife, ready to face whatever emerged. Come on then. She shouted into the black void, though her heart pounded with every syllable. The children's eyes were wide in the closet, brimming with fear and confusion, and in that moment of doubt, all Sarah had was the dim hope that their love could shield them from the chaos lurking just out of view, and then, a shape began to take form, a silhouette emerging from the depths as if coaxing itself into existence. But as it did, a memory flickered in Sarah's mind, a face, familiar yet folded within shadows. Mommy Zoe's voice quaked, trembling with uncertainty. Stay back. Sarah forcefully demanded, but she could feel her voice falter. Was it truly coming for them, or had fear warped her perception of reality? The darkness laughed, swallowing her shaky breath. Join me, Sarah. I can make it all stop suddenly. The choice weighed heavier than before, and the line between protecting her children and succumbing to despair blurred into night. Somewhere in the distance came the echo of a familiar laugh, haunting her, and she realized this was only just the beginning. What if the darkness had already ensnared someone she loved? The air crackled with static as the darkness seemed to hold its breath. Sarah's heart raced, that voice, so intimate, spun around her like a web. She peered into the void where the silhouette lingered, swallowing her anxiety with its impossible presence. The thought of losing another child clawed at her. An old wound reopened, raw and aching. Which one of us? The voice morphed, slinking into her mind like a serpent. Is it Zoe? Perhaps sweet little Liam? Sarah's blood ran cold. The truth was painful, unbearable. Someone had been taken before. How could she risk either child now? Mommy Zoe ventured softly, her small voice fragile like glass. Stay. Sarah's words caught in her throat as she felt the overwhelming pull of the darkness. It had such power, such temptation. What if it could really help? What if it could erase pain? But as the shadows twisted and slithered closer, engulfing her, something flickered in her vision. Memories of laughter, sunlight, and her children's gummy grins danced just out of reach. I want to let you take them. She yelled, clenching the knife, knowing its weight was all she had against the creeping despair. The figure grew clearer, resolving into a face that twisted her stomach, a cerulean glare and a ragged smile. Helen. Sarah's sister, the light in her life before the accident. Gone, but here, lurking. Laughter that once brought joy now echoed like a blade. You're too late, Sarah. I only want to reunite our family. The room pulsed, shadows throbbing with life. The walls seemed to close in, leaving little room to breathe. Heart pounding, Sarah felt the knife tremble in her grip. You're not the answer, Helen. You're not real. But the figure stepped closer, and with it, the chill seeped deeper. You won't have to fight anymore. Just give in. Let me show you. Whispers exploded in her ears, ringing of long-lost dreams and tenderness. Everywhere she looked, the shadows crept closer, wrapping arms around her. The darkness oozed promises, wrapping her in soft lies that nearly pulled her under. Mommy. Liam's sharp cry shattered the illusion, a piercing reminder of the need for clarity. Snapping back, Sarah turned, eyes wide, toward their hiding place in the closet. No! She shouted, pushing through the oppressive weight, willing the shadows to part like a curtain. You won't take them from me. With each step she took toward the closet, the shadows recoiled, lashed out. It was like maneuvering through a thick fog, every movement strained, every breath a hot ember burning her lungs. Join me. Join us. Helen's voice was both a siren's song and a warning, smothering the air with desperation. Yet Sarah shoved through the terror, reaching the closet door. She opened it swiftly. Her children's faces, pale and trembling, stared back, filled with terror and hope. Their silent pleas ignited something in her. Stay close. She wrapped her arms around them, a protective cage against the encroaching malevolence. I'll keep you safe, she promised, the words filling her like a warm light fighting against the encroaching chill. But the laughter of the darkness rang louder, now mocking her resilience. You think you can escape me? Sarah felt each pulse of fear radiating from her children, the warmth of their small bodies pressing into her side, grounding her. Not without a fight. The shadows roiled, fierce and alive, shifting and swirling around their fortress of flesh and bone. And then, as if the very air screamed, every light flickered out. In the pitch black, panic surged. Beating hearts sounded like drums, escalating into a cacophony of despair. Stay together. She whispered fiercely, but the biting chill now wrapped around them, a dark promise of what was to come. Somewhere in the suffocating silence, Helen's voice returned, smooth and penetrating. Why resist, Sarah? Join me, and you'll never be alone again. A flicker of doubt gnawed at her about the depths of her own mind. She wasn't just fighting the hell outside, she was wrestling the darkness within. The shadows shifted again, and for a brief moment, Sarah felt a spark of light. Her children's eyes reflected in the dark, a lighthouse guiding her home. But as she prepared to face the swirling darkness, a piercing shriek erupted through the void, rising above everything else. Mommy, I'm scared. The darkness simmered, ready to pounce, while Sarah thought, what happened to the power of love against fear? But something about that voice, raw and echoing, deepened her dread. If fear had a voice, it sounded like Liam's. Just then, she realized the darkness was plucking at the strings of her children's minds, weaving their deepest fears into a new reality. Time was running out. What would she sacrifice to save them this time? A shiver ran down Sarah's spine as she clutched her children tight, her heart racing against the stifling silence that pressed in on them like a living entity. The play of shadows felt intentional, fluid, as if they were agents of the dark, bent on pulling them apart. Mommy? Zoe's voice trembled, barely a whisper above the rising tide of dread. Just stay quiet, Sarah urged, her nails digging into their shoulders, trying to anchor herself in this storm of fear. The shadows writhed, licking at the edges of her vision like hungry flames. Something shifted in the darkness, a low growl reverberating through the air like the breath of a beast lurking just beyond comprehension. The very essence of it felt alive, hungry for despair. Fear coiled tight in Sarah's stomach as she recalled the tales Helen would share, speaking of dark spirits that fed on sorrow. No, no, not like this. She murmured, fighting back tears. Her mind raced with thoughts of her sister, if Helen had returned from some hellish realm to lure her back into the depths of grief. Her heart faltered. What if this was all a twisted game? What if the darkness was merely mirroring her own inner turmoil, feeding off it? Mommy, I want to go home, Liam whimpered, tugging at her pants, his little fingers trembling. Sarah tightened her grip around them, her resolve melting ever so slightly. If home was filled with laughter, light, and warmth, what was this darkness taking them towards? The voices whispered louder now, curling around her mind, winding through memories that tasted of salt and bitterness. Join us, Sarah. Helen's voice purred again, drenched in sweet malice from the void. Why fight the inevitable? They could be with you forever if you just give in. It was tempting, so very tempting. She could feel the weight of exhaustion pulling at her limbs, the darkness playing tricks, promising safety. But she couldn't disable the alarm bells ringing in her head. Her children needed her now more than ever. She took a deep breath, centering herself. "We're not going to let you win," she growled, each word laced with fierce determination. "I want to let you take them." In response, the shadows convulsed with rage. The air grew heavier still, electricity crackling through the atmosphere, tinged with dankness, as if a storm was brewing just beyond the veil. Then, without warning, an agonizing scream pierced through the reverberating gloom. It was a sound of unbearable agony, raw and chilling. "Mommy, please. Help me." Sarah's heart plummeted. That scream, it didn't belong to any of them. "Liam!" she cried, the shrill panic rising in her throat. "Are you okay?" The shadows diverted her attention, tightening their hold, but she couldn't look away from her son. As her pleading eyes searched the darkness, her breath hitched as she felt a sudden change, like the air around her thickened and coiled with life. The closet door began to shift, peeling away as if revealing not just shadows but something far more sinister. Liam's terrified expression transformed before her, eyes widening in horror, reflecting something dark, something not human. "Mommy, help!" he repeated, the sound now primal, echoing through the void. "No!" Sarah shouted, the knife still gripped tightly in her hand, aligning it against the encroaching darkness. With one fierce push, she lunged forward, but the darkness retaliated fiercely, claws of shadow lashing out until she felt the cold smear across her ankle, pulling her down. "Please," she gasped as she felt her grip falter. The knife slipped against her palm, nearing escape. The shadows roared in triumph, laughter pouring out of the void. "You will join us, Sarah. You cannot save them." From somewhere deep, she pulled her last reserves of strength. In one desperate moment of defiance, she raised the knife, the blade glinting with a flicker of the light she fought to harness. The dark crowd closed in, but something white-hot ignited in her soul. "I will not let you take my children." With a cry of fury, Sarah plunged the knife down, tearing through the darkness as if cutting through desperation itself. The shadows shrieked, dissipating, but it was only then that she heard the strangest sound: laughter, not from darkness but from the children, echoing with joy, or was it horror? Suddenly, a blinding flash jolted through the room, illuminating their fearful faces, and then, an ominous silence descended, so profound that it left Sarah gasping for breath. As the light flickered, she caught just a glimpse of something forming at the edges of the hallway, a figure swallowing light, looming ever closer. "Sarah," it beckoned, and her heart sank. What had she awakened? Sarah's heart raced as the figure stepped into view, its shape twisting grotesquely, stretching and bending the very fabric of reality. Each movement was fluid, hypnotic, like smoke unfurling in the air. The children whimpered behind her, clinging tighter as if they could melt into her skin. "Mommy!" Zoe cried, her voice cracking, desperation spilling over. "What is that?" "I don't know," Sarah managed, her throat tight with fear as her gaze remained locked on the figure. It was a shimmer of darkness, yet it had shape of face, twisted in an expression of cruel anticipation, lurking just beyond comprehension. The temperature dropped sharply, the air thickening as if it bore down on her, squeezing her lungs. In its presence, every breath felt like a battle, every heartbeat a war drum. But still, she faced it, defiance igniting like a flicker of flame against the night. "Get back!" she shouted, brandishing the knife before her as if it held the power to ward off the darkness. "You don't get to take them." The laughter rippled through the air again, a sound of mockery that buzzed in her ears. "You think you can protect them from me, Sarah? They are already mine." "No!" she screamed, the knife trembling in her grip. As she stood between her children and the encroaching shadow, she felt a surge of protectiveness, strong enough to push against the freezing dread that gnawed at her resolve. "Mommy?" Liam's voice was a tiny gasp, caught between fear and confusion. The darkness responded by stretching further toward them, its ominous form seething, and Sarah's desperation turned into rage. "Not today. As if in answer to her anger, the light from the flickering bulb overhead began to pulsate, flickering with frantic urgency. Shadows danced chaotically around the room, responding to the confrontation, swirling and colliding like a living tapestry woven from nightmares. "Sarah," it spoke again, its voice smoother this time, like syrup spilling over a blade. "Join us. Don't you want your peace? Don't you want them safe?" "My peace!" she shouted, the words bursting from her as she felt the weight of her grief crash against her heart. "You think this is peace? It's a prison, built on sorrow." The figure paused, tilting its head slightly, almost curiously. "These children weigh you down. Let me take their burden. They will suffer less. In the darkness, there is only bliss." "No." The knife felt like an extension of her arm, and with a primal scream, she lunged. The blade sliced through shadow, sending a shockwave that rippled through the air. The figure howled, a sound that screeched against her bones, and for a moment, Sarah felt a whirlwind of warmth, a first glimpse of hope, but it faded, replaced by a furious backlash. The shadows lashed out, constricting her limbs, pulling her back against the wall like shackles of cold iron. "Foolish woman," it hissed. "You don't understand what you are fighting." The light flickered more violently now, and with each blink, she saw flashes of their past, brief moments of joy that contrasted sharply against the encroaching doom. Her children's laughter, their first steps, warm hugs, snippets of life that reminded her of love and light. "Mommy!" Zoe cried as the shadows drew closer, gathering strength with each desperate breath. "Hold on!" Sarah cried back, her voice a desperate plea flavored with determination. Yet, even as she fought, she sensed the darkness adjusting its grip, tightening like a vice. In that awful moment, the children's eyes locked with hers. The fear was palpable, but so was something else, a flicker of understanding. They were not just scared, they were ready, too. And then it struck her, the answer had been there all along. Banding together was their only hope. "Together," she urged, voice rising above the oppressive growl of the shadows. "Trust me." But just as they seemed to shift, as if embracing her call, the beast surged forward, slashing through the air, darkness spilling from its being, and then, a scream, from behind them. "Mommy! Liam!" Before she could turn, an icy grip seized Sarah's heart and pulled her into the void. What had she succumbed to? As the world blinked out, one thought remained: who would survive the darkness? A blinding flash lit up Sarah's mind, like lightning striking a barren field. The darkness swallowed her whole, rupturing her sense of self. It felt like falling down, into an endless pit where screams morphed into silence. "Mommy!" Zoe's voice echoed, a haunting whisper that lingered beyond the chill. Panic clawed at her throat as shadows churned around her, swirling like a violent storm. Sarah knew she had to fight, but where was she? Where were her children? Suddenly, the world snapped back into focus. She was on the cold, hard ground of a shadowy room, the air thick with an overpowering stench that made her gag. The walls twisted and contorted, littered with grotesque faces that stared back, each one frozen in a moment of despair. "Zoe! Liam!" she screamed, her voice trembling as dread enveloped her. "Mommy!" Liam's voice echoed again, this time stronger. It took a moment, but Sarah followed the sound, crawling, clawing her way through the dark. "Stay close!" she shouted, even as a shadow brushed past her. It felt like ice, slinking away, teasing her resolve. As she moved, the temperature sank lower, her breath visible in the frozen air. Sarah's heart raced. She desperately searched through the tangled mass of shadows, guided by the faint voices that blossomed like dying embers in the cold dark. "Mommy, please!" Zoe cried, her voice tinged with unshed tears. Sarah stumbled forward, almost tripping over a twisted branch that mimicked a finger reaching up from the ground, trying to pull her back. She shook the sensation off and pressed deeper into the darkness, a knife still gripped tightly in her hand. "Stay together. she urged, but a creeping doubt slithered into her mind. Was she leading them to safety or into a trap? The soft sobs of the children tugged at her heart. "We're coming," she shouted, determination lacing her words. But every breath felt heavier, every heartbeat echoed like thunder in her ears as she pushed against the encroaching dark. Then she spotted them, a flicker of movement off to the side. Zoe and Liam stood huddled together, their tiny figures illuminated by a strange glow radiating from a sliver of light breaking through the shadows. "Mommy!" they chorused, their expressions torn between fear and hope. "Hold on!" Sarah shouted, racing toward them, her mother's instinct overwhelming the dread. But as she reached for them, a thunderous roar erupted from the void, sending shockwaves through the air. The light flickered violently, snapping like a flame caught in a windstorm. Shadows launched at her, and she swung the knife, feeling the sting of clashing cold. It lunged, twisting grotesquely as if trying to envelop her children in its fog. The creature stretched, claws grasping toward Zoe and Liam, trying to brush their small frames with its darkness. In her heart, Sarah's rage ignited. "Not my children!" she howled, defiance ripping through the cave of fear in her chest. With every ounce of strength, she lunged into the abyss, slicing through the shadow's grasp, creating a small circle of light around her children. "Now!" she yelled. "Run!" Zoe bolted toward her, but Liam hesitated, fear anchoring him. "Mom!" he cried, frozen in place. "Trust me!" Sarah screamed, fear strangling her words. The darkness hissed, its icy breath scraping against her skin. Just as Liam started moving, the shadows lunged again, tightening around Sarah, yanking her back toward the void. "Liam! Zoe!" she yelled, reaching out. Then the world dissolved once more, collapsing into a maelstrom of shadows and light, and everything went dark. A moment later, she found herself hovering half awake in that cursed place again. The faces in the walls grinned wider, and an ominous whisper traveled through the air. "You've chosen unwisely, Sarah." "What have I done?" she thought as her pulse thundered like a war drum. "What darkness have I unleashed?" But as that thought settled, a flicker of light erupted nearby through the void. It looked like a door, with promises of escape. Was it a trick? Or real salvation? Despair twisted with hope. An awareness gnawed at her. Darkness was closing in. Will they break free? She pondered as shadows tightened their grip, restless and hungry. And in that moment of indecision, the door slowly began to close. Sarah's heart raced with renewed vigor. The whispers grew louder, gnawing at her mind, but one thought pierced through the swirling confusion: her children. They needed her. She couldn't let them fall into the abyss. As the door to salvation began to close, Sarah leaped forward, adrenaline surging through her veins. "Hold on, my loves!" she screamed, each syllable a lifeline wrapped in desperation. She could see the flickers of hope reflected in Zoe and Liam's eyes, their tiny forms seeping into her determination. The shadows lunged toward them, clawing through the darkness with hungry intent. But she was ready. With a fierce determination, Sarah raised the knife, a crude weapon in this realm of nightmares. Fueled by love, she thrust it into the swirling form that threatened to consume them. "Get back!" she bellowed. The blade sliced through the cold air, connecting with something substantial. The darkness spasmed, recoiling like a wounded beast. "You dare!" it hissed, voice laced with venomous fury, but Sarah pressed on, driving her will against the malevolence surrounding them. "Run!" was the last command she uttered, her voice slicing through despair like a beacon. Zoe and Liam bolted toward the flickering light, fear and determination driving their legs. She could hear their feet pounding against the shadowed ground, desperate for freedom, and she swiped at the darkness, ensuring it wouldn't reach them. With every ounce of her strength, Sarah fought through the suffocating weight of shadow. The air crackled with energy, the darkness swirling tighter, taunting her, yet it was as if her connection with her children had ignited an internal flame. They were her purpose, her reason to battle, without them, nothing mattered. Just as she felt the shadows lurch toward them again, Sarah pivoted, planting her feet wide, head held high. "You won't take my family." With a roar that shattered the chilling gloom, she plunged the knife again, this time plunging deep, aiming to sever the very essence of the darkness. The air exploded with light, bright and blinding, a searing white that bathed the cold room in warmth. For a heartbeat everything paused. The shadows shrieked in agony, twisting and crumbling around her, as if unraveling like old cloth. The face inside contorted, revealing a raw mixture of rage and primal fear. "You think you've won?" it screeched, yet Sarah stood firm, unyielding. "Yes," she screamed back, embodying every ounce of love her heart could conjure. The blinding light surged into a magnificent wave, bursting forth like a supernova, sweeping over the labyrinth of shadows until everything reeled back in retreat. In seconds, the darkness began to fade, dissipating into thin air like smoke under a fresh breeze. The cries of the trapped faces resonated, echoing as the walls crumbled away, revealing the true essence of reality: light, warmth, safety. The boundaries of that malevolent realm dissolved around them, leading Sarah to the flickering dance of colors she had longed for. "Mommy!" Zoe and Liam shouted, their arms wrapping tightly around her waist as she enveloped them in a fierce embrace. All around them, the terrifying echoes of despair and horror melted away, replaced by the gentle sigh of life being reborn. Tears streamed down Sarah's face, relief blooming in her chest. Together they stumbled into the light, the warmth wrapping around them like a protective blanket. Their hearts beat in unison, a true family shielded from darkness at last. Suddenly, a gentle hum pulsed through the air, resonating with the peace of the day breaking. They stood together, breathing in the sunlight's embrace, and slowly, she felt the agony of horror slip away, each breath a reminder that love thrived beyond fear. The battered remnants of the night vanished completely, leaving only an open space of dazzling brilliance. "We're safe," she whispered, sinking to her knees before her children, engulfed by a joyful tide of gratitude. "We're finally safe." As the sun streamed into their world, illuminating every corner, Sarah made a vow in that tranquil moment, a promise against the shadows that once threatened to tear them apart. They would live beyond fear, and together, carve out every moment that the darkness could never take again. "Let us go home," she said softly, squeezing their small hands. They turned, walking toward a brighter future, one step at a time. "Now that you've reached the thrilling conclusion, don't wait another moment. You need to subscribe now to the channel so you won't miss any exclusive stories that are just waiting for you. Smash that like button now to feed the algorithm. Your support makes a huge difference. Flood the comments section with your reactions and theories about this shocking ending. I want to hear from you. And finally, don't wait even one more second to share this video with at least 5 friends who need to see this conclusion. Your support helps keep the stories flowing. Join the community.